Good morning, everyone. My name is Valgerður Jóhannsdóttir. I'm an associate professor in journalism at the University of Iceland. More importantly, now I'm the director of this conference. And on behalf of myself and my Nordic colleagues, I am very pleased to welcome you to this Nordic Summit for Gender Equality in the News. I would like to welcome those of you who are here with us at Club, and also those of you who are online. And I want to just thank you all for taking the time to be with us today and engage with this important topic. 2025 marked the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Platform for Action, which called for women's equal participation in and through the media. And it was in Beijing 30 years ago that the first global media monitoring findings were presented. And as many of you know, the GMMP is the longest running and most comprehensive study of the role and representation of women and men in the media. And the GMMP study is kind of the groundwork or foundation for this conference, so to speak. Many of the issues that were identified in the Beijing Declaration, they remain with us today, including representation, power and voice in the media, and gender equality in the news is not a side issue. It shapes public debate, democratic participation, and how societies understand themselves. Now, the aim of this conference is simple but ambitious. We want to ask who makes the news today, whose voices are heard and whose are not. We also want to move sort of beyond the diagnosis and focus on solutions. What works? What doesn't work? What can we realistically change? And we encourage everyone in the room and online to take part, ask questions, challenge assumptions. We are fortunate in the group of people gathered here today. So while the focus is Nordic, we do have researchers, journalists and activists from different parts of the world, and it's a real privilege to have this mix of perspectives and expertise in one place. This is a Nordic summit, and the Nordic countries are very often presented as leaders in gender equality. And I think that makes this discussion especially important, because high rankings don't mean that the work is done. And it gives us the responsibility to sort of look critically at our own media and professional practices. This conference would not have been possible if not for the generous support of the Nordic Council of Ministers. So a huge thank you to them and our other sponsors, the Icelandic Union of Journalists, Nordicom, and the UNESCO Unitary Network on Gender Media and ICTs. And then just a few practical notes. As Maria mentioned, we will take our lunch break, which is served here. And after the break, we move away, as Maria said, after the coffee break, we move away from the formal presentation and start discussing and reflecting. And with that, I would just once again like to thank you for being here. I look forward to the conversation ahead. And now I'll give the floor to Maria.
Thank you. And I'm just going to do some heads up. You can see that we are many organizations, universities behind this, but also we have the important sponsor that makes this stream possible. The Union of Journalists on Iceland, and also, of course, the Nordic Council of Ministers and Nordicom, who has a little book table over here if you're in the room. And if you're on Zoom, you can just look up nordicom.gu.se, and you find all the books online. But we talked about all the people made it possible, but maybe some of the most important ones are the student volunteers. Could you please stand up in the room? You won't see on Zoom, but we have from Iceland, Finland, and Denmark, and Sweden. A little group. Yes. And they are on the chat room on Zoom. They have an Instagram account which you can follow. And for you who are on Zoom, we also post all the PDF of the slides. If you don't think it's good enough, you can look at the slides for yourself. And we will also upload the slides on our conference website. So just before giving the floor, if someone forgot, like, why is this still important? Valgedur said it, of course. But I think there are many, like, various reasons that you usually talk about, that the democratic argument that we're half the population, right? And what concerns that part should be seen and heard. But then you have, like, the editors are doing a bad job if they don't see these stories and don't think they're newsworthy. And the third one is for the business side of the media industry, because it's both this freedom of expression, but then making the money, right? And it's not profitable to just address some of the population, right? So that's like a baseline arguments if you haven't heard them before. And with that, I would like to give the floor now to one of the key persons for this global media monitoring project, that is Sarah Macharia. Please come up here. And together with Rod Molina, they have been in charge of a global report. And so we thought we'd start off with the global patterns. So please give a warm welcome to Sarah Macharia. And she's been global head of this since 2010. So you know a lot, right? Based in Kenya and Toronto. So very welcome.
Thank you very much.
And you have a clicker here, so you do like this, and you have the slide over there.
Wonderful.
That's the slide, that's the next slide.
Oh, I see them here.
High tech.
Thank you very much, Maria. Good morning. Good morning, friends, colleagues, participants in the room and online. Is this okay? Yeah? Okay, so it's a pleasure, it's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you for your presence, both in the room and online. Thank you, Professor Edstrom and Professor Valgeru, for all the work that you have done to dream about this summit and to make it come into being. Now, for the benefit of colleagues here who are encountering the Global Media Monitoring Project for the first time, I will briefly talk about our story. I will highlight some major findings and analysis, and then I'll focus the rest of the conversation on what next. So the GMMP is, when we are asked what is your elevator pitch for the GMMP, it is a research and advocacy initiative for gender equality in and through the news media. Feminist communication scholar Margaret Gallagher put it very well. She called the GMMP the most enduring enterprise of the global women's movement. The idea of a GMMP was birthed some 32 years ago at a conference for women communicators in Bangkok. And at that first GMMP that happened in 1995, just over 70 countries took part. So every 5 years since then, the monitoring has happened. It has expanded in scope and scale. And the media watchers who are in the room and online, thank you so much for breathing life into this project from the very beginning. As the timeline grows, the insights on the how and the why become sharper, as we know with longitudinal research. The predictions about the future grow more accurate. And the insights build knowledge about what measures are more likely to steer change towards the direction that we want. Now, Nordic nations perform better than the rest of the world on all the indicators measured by the GMMP, in line with international metrics on gender equality. Let's look. Has it changed? There. So 83% of countries in the world, with 97% of the global population, have taken part in the GMMP. So this is a snapshot of where the countries stand. There we are. It's a little tiny, but we have the green arrows to show most of the Nordic countries, plus a few comparisons from Europe. So this is a snapshot of where the GMMP 2025 participating countries stand on the gender equality in the news media, or GEM index. I will not talk about the GEM index because Monica and Matthias will talk about it later. So the gender in news gap is wider in 40% of the countries today than it was 5 years ago. The average GEM score index in 2025 has improved just a few points from the 2020 edition. Gender equality in the news is moderately correlated with gender inequality in other development sectors. In fact, news gender inequality is much more acute than in the lived experience. This chart shows the relationship between the GEM index on the y-axis and the gender social norms index on the x-axis. So the gender social norms index measures here, GSNI2, measures the share of people with at least 2 biases against women. So for both indices, I wish I had a clicker, for both indices, the 0 represents total gender equality. Minus 100 on the GEM index represents total gender inequality, that is all people in the news are women, plus the journalist. Plus 100 in the case of the gender social norms index means 100% of the population holds 2 or more biases against women on the measures that are measured by the GSNI, that is political inequality, educational, economic, and physical integrity. So the countries in the upper left-hand column lean more towards relatively higher scores on gender equality in the news, and relatively low numbers of the population with at least 2 biases against women. In the bottom right-hand column, quadrant, there the population leans more towards people with at least 2 biases against women, and also leans towards greater gender inequality in the news media. The regression line here indicates that only 30% of gender inequality in the news is related to gender social norms in society and vice versa. So 70% of this relationship cannot be explained by gender inequality in reality. And this is similar to other tests that we have done, correlating the association between gender inequality in the news and other gender markers in society, for example, the Gender Inequality Index and the Gender Development Index, meaning that there is something else that's baked into the news culture at the bedrock of journalism that works to accentuate inequality between women and men in mainstream news narratives. Let's look at people in the news. So following a slow and steady rise in women's share of visibility and voice in the news, progress began flatlining in 2010, a trend that continues to date. Of the people seen, heard, or spoken about in print and broadcast news, only 26% are women, and this represents a 9-point change in 30 years. In stories published on dedicated news websites, women's presence is only marginally higher at 29%. We looked at minority backgrounds, and people from minority backgrounds, that's minority based on race, ethnicity, religion, etc., they make up 6 out of every 100 persons seen, heard, or spoken about across traditional and digital news worldwide. The likelihood that a woman in the news is part of a minority group is less than 1 in 10. The slow but sure improvement in women's presence overall up until 2010 can be explained by other markers if we look at explanations from other sectors such as women in economy or women in politics. And at that time, or up to around 2010, there was, a heightened global feminist activism. There was gender policy adoptions in media organizations, and there were national commitments to conventions to gender equality. But all four media types have converged and flatlined to a level far short of parity. And this is the one key finding, signaling a glass ceiling. So once the baseline of visibility was achieved, the motivation for fundamental structural change appears to have dissipated. So looking at the regional breakdown, the 30-year trend is upward for almost all regions. We can see that upward slope, with rises and dips during different periods. Today, North American legacy media are the best performers, with 40% of subjects and sources who are women, while Asia and the Middle East, as always, are at the tail. Europe is around the median, tying with Latin America. So the GMMP fully integrated websites, news websites, into the monitoring in 2015. In 2025, Europe is in third position, surpassed by Pacific, here represented by only Australia and New Zealand, and the Caribbean. Looking at reporters, the gender gap in reporters in the news is narrower today than when it was first tracked for print and broadcast news. In newspapers, that's the first set of columns there, there has been a steady rise across 30 years. While for newscasts, that's radio newscasts and television newscasts, the increase was dramatic between 2000 and 2005, before leveling out until 2025, with oscillations during this period. In online newsrooms, that's the final set of bars over there, the proportion of female reporters has held steady at 43% since 2015. When you slice the data by topic, we see that female reporters exceed male reporters in just two beats: science and health and celebrity news, and they are most severely underrepresented in sports news. This visual conveys the conclusion on resistance towards parity in the reporter role, both across medium type and across news beats. The issues have hopped online into digital newsrooms. The 10-year view indicates that only Europe has had a steady, uninterrupted rise in the proportion of women reporters in online news. One region is at parity, one has more women than men reporters in online stories, and two are severely unequal, the Middle East and Africa. That the overall statistic has hovered between 42 and 43% signals that the challenge is not the medium, but it lies in the underbelly of the news system. So beyond analyzing change across space and time, the GMMP data can be overlaid with other data to build knowledge on correlations with other potentially related factors within and beyond the news. So here we looked at two. There exists a consistent gender difference in reporting, meaning stories by women reporters have consistently contained a higher proportion of female subjects and sources, and that difference has been a consistent 5 points since we started tracking it than those by male reporters. However, and here we can almost see the flat line, this graph, first graph, represents the gender gap in sources and subjects versus the gender gap in reporters, female minus male. The trend, the line, the invisible flat line is almost horizontal, meaning there's not much of an association. However, the relationship is stronger, positive, though moderate, between the proportion of women in news leadership and gender equality in the news. As the proportion of women in top editor positions rises, the proportion of subjects, sources, and reporters in the stories trends towards gender equality. Countries with a higher percentage of women in top editorial roles tend to have better scores for gender equality in the news. And this is a general pattern. There are exceptions. For example, we see Hong Kong over there that had about 33% of editors, but are still low score on the GEM index. So increasing the percentage of women in top editorial positions is generally associated with greater gender equality in news content. And now I'd like to briefly speak to the findings on GBV reporting, very briefly. And that's because the proportion of stories that address gender-based violence is very few when you look at it nationally by country. But it makes more sense to speak about it globally. In 2025, we wanted to understand the extent to which the news media take gender-based violence seriously. You will remember that during COVID, GBV was called the second pandemic. In previous GMMP studies, GBV stories were captured and analyzed within the major topic crime and violence. And in 2025, there was a departure to separate out the GBV stories from general crime just for a clearer analysis. So less than 2% of articles covered GBV, a count that is at odds with the serious nature of GBV. And in fact, men are 50% of the people in GBV stories. When you look at the top occupations of both men and women, most females in the GBV articles are celebrities, homemakers, children, while most males are either criminals, legal professionals, or celebrities. Moving on, 59% of women in GBV stories are identified as victims or survivors, compared to just 6% of men. And of all victims and survivors as a whole, almost 70% are adult women, a quarter are girls, and 2% are boys. So finally, this is a critical moment of reflection for us. Remember, as we all know, as the timeline grows longer, we get to more insights on why and how, and then we can also predict the future. So the 30-year arc reveals a clear pattern of small but stable early gains, followed by a 15-year plateau. So we can infer from the wider context why this plateau, why the early gains happened, and why the invisible ceiling has taken hold. So we were relieved when we received the 2025 findings to find that the center had held. Regressions in performance are few, and they're not on the key indicators. Most have held steady, some have seen no change at all, while the overall metric has continued its flatline trend. So it is a concern when we think about current geopolitics. It is a concern that the worsening anti-women, anti-gender equality, anti-rights, global geopolitics may spread like a contagion, and the rollback on rights will gain steam. This past weekend, I had the privilege to speak at a seminar that was organized by our Japanese team, led by Professor Kyoko Takahashi. And there were interesting questions. The journalists in the room wanted to know how the media could do better, especially in the face of current challenges that are challenging the sustainability of the news industry. Another person wanted to know whether and how artificial intelligence could be imagined as a tool for change. I hope that the commitments that come out of this summit will have a way forward. And in fact, as has been mentioned, the Nordic region has the ability and is well placed to take the lead for the rest of the world. Thank you.
Sarah, thank you very much. I just wanted, we'll take questions later, but I just wanted to pose this one question to you, Sarah, because you mentioned that GMMP has expanded and expanded in its new wave, but that didn't happen last time, or a few countries. Why do you think that is?
Well, that really is a question of resources, because previously we had support from some major funders, little support, but this time round we had no support for the countries, and each of the countries had to raise the funding themselves. So those who were able to raise funding locally were able to participate. I mean, not everyone has the luxury to spend their own resources to buy newspapers, to sit down and do the coding. So really, it was a funding issue. And while the number of countries had risen from some 70 to 80 in 2005 all the way to 116 in 2020, then we had a drop to 94 countries. That's a main reason. At the same time, we know that the sample is quite representative of the variety of media systems and countries across the globe.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thanks again for it was really interesting, if not very uplifting. But as you said, the Nordics have been in the lead, and now we are going to sort of narrow the focus and look at the Nordic countries specifically. So Maria is going to moderate a Nordic panel and take over.
So, and Sarah is still in the room and can answer questions, be part of the conversations later on. And as I said, the slides are available on Zoom, and you can get them from the website later on also as well. So now I say very welcome to Hanne Jørndrup, Danish GMMP coordinator from Roskilde University, and then we have Finnborg Steinsdottir. That is Steinsdottir, Thor as the God, I was told, yes. Who is from University of Iceland and coordinating from there. And then next person is Sika Brandt-Ville from University of Greenland, head of department in journalism, who didn't manage to be part of the study this year. But we thought it's very interesting to have Greenland with us, because that's also illustrates that we also have problems collecting the data. It's basically a volunteer project, this. And if you're very few in your department or in the journalism organizations, it's very difficult to find the people doing it. So very much welcome, Sika. And then we have, who's next? It's Jonita Sivonen from the University of Helsinki. The long time, she started coding in 1995. So she's been for 30 years doing this. I think it's an applause for So you are older than the project, but just barely, right? And then we have Elisabeth Eide from Oslo Met, who has also been a long-time national coordinator for the Norwegian reports, and you were a professor emerita. So that's what you can do when you retire, to keep on doing this. And then we have Agneta Söderberg Jakobsson from the Linné University for Your Media Institute, who's the national coordinator of Sweden. So very welcome. And we said we will dig deeper into the national reports, but that said, you have to bear in mind that the strong case of GMMP is the global data that you just seen. Once you go down to a singular country, maybe you have too few cases and it's very unstable, it moves around a lot more, and it depends on the capacity of the national team to actually code enough data. But also, we've seen in Sweden at least, that when we correlate that with other data, that news are very routinized. You have like the foreign news, the local, national, you have like a sort of mix that goes like on, so even one day can actually tell you something. So we will start with this picture. This is the development in the Nordic countries. It's not a very beautiful picture, but then we can have all the countries and one side, the generals, the women in the news. And the global news is the little slightly thicker. You see the 17 to 26%. That was Sarah was showing, and the other is the countries here. So I will ask you to explain, or at least comment on your national report. And we go with the top number, Finnborg. Iceland was the best in this last. You had the highest share of women.
Yes, and as you can see, yeah, we have 39% women, and this is a very positive change from 2020. However, this has not been a upward movement. You can see 2025 we were actually at the bottom, so it's been a very bumpy road for us. Possible explanation could be that we have women in all leading public positions. They're leading the government. We have 3 women. Majority of ministers are women. The bishop, the rectors, everyone, in public positions. But well, but then if you think about the power dynamics in society, women are actually not leading the banks and the business sectors and other sectors. We have a very gender-segregated labor market. But I would actually think if gender representation in power positions is the only explanatory factor, I would actually think this number should be higher. But given all the people that I've been counting. So this reflects, I think, that gender and intersectional power dimensions in society. What is considered newsworthy, who's credible, etc.
But would you say that gender in the news is like a main topic in the discussion on Iceland? Because I was in Reykjavik in 2015 when the results came, and it was kind of a scandal in Iceland. How can we be so bad in the news, right? And there were these seminars and discussion about that, it was highlighted in the news.
Yes.
Like negative news are always good, right? So it was like a big thing on Iceland in 2015.
Yeah,
Has that had an effect, do you think? Yeah.
Well, at that time, I think we were struggling with what we call the aura of gender equality. That everything is perfect, so why are we talking about gender issues? And then we see these type of results that reflect another reality. So, but gender in the news, of course, is a topic that me and Valgerður are very interested in, and our colleagues here from Iceland, but I'm not sure if it's a mainstream thing. But especially when we have negative results, we definitely report on them. But also when we have very positive results, like we have from the global gender gap. Yeah. Every year we see in the news, like Iceland is leading the global gender gap, but we're not number one in the other measurements, and we never report on them, so.
But I think one interesting thing here is that no one, we're supposed to be the lead in the Nordic countries, but no one goes above 40%, as you see, except for Greenland, who had taken part one time. That's the 41 number. And it was Naima Hussein who was the coordinator. She couldn't be here today, unfortunately, but we met her yesterday. So Sika, would you like to say something? And if you want to say it in Danish, we have a translator. You.
Thank you. Although we have not had the time to produce full report this year, I can say with reasonable confidence that the figures will look very similar to those from the most recent report for 5 years ago. Yeah.
Not much have changed.
No. In Greenland, we see a fairly balanced use of female and male sources in the news. The last time we conducted a full count, Greenland actually ranked highest among the Nordic countries in terms of gender balance. We are, of course, pleased with that result, but it does not mean that everything is perfect or that there is not room for improvements. If we look at journalism's education and the profession more broadly, the picture is also relatively balanced. Among applicants to the journalism program, women and men are fairly evenly represented, although more women have graduated in recent years. The same applies to newsroom, where the gender distribution among working journalists is also quite even. For those of you who may not be familiar with Greenlandic media landscape, it's a small and highly concentrated. We have two major nation media houses. One is the public service broadcaster, KNR, which operates on radio, television, and online. The other is Sommitjak.ag, which today consists of one printed newspaper and online. Looking at the media content from May 2025, last year, when the study was conducted, both women and men are clearly presented as sources. However, still see familiar patterns. Men tend to dominate business and economic news, while women appear more often in cultural and human interests stories. This is not unique to Greenland and will likely sound familiar to many of yours country. Political coverage reflects the structure of our political system, which is also relatively gender balanced. The current government in Greenland is close to parity. Out of 5 municipalities, 3 mayors are women and 2 are men. At ministerial level, there is an equal number of men and women, and 2 female ministers in particular have been highly visible in the media. Naja Nathanielsen, Minister of Mineral Resources, and Vivian Motzfeldt, Minister of Foreign Affairs. Greenland participates in the Nordic Global Media Monitoring Project, which provides an important benchmark. According to the latest data, 41% of sources in Greenlandic news are women. This is well above the global average of 25% and the highest share among the Nordic countries. At the same time, women most often appear as spokespersons, which raises questions about the authority, experts, and who is framed as an expert.
So maybe we come back to the different positions later, but now you got a little bit idea of Greenland that everyone is so interested of nowadays. And there actually was a session here last night about new geopolitics, so it's present even at Club here. So I think we just go down to the next country then, that would be Sweden, who is number 2 on this list. And Agneta, what would you say about the development in Sweden here?
Okay, first I want to say that I've actually replaced Maria. Maria used to be the national coordinator for Sweden, and now it's my university. Yes. So just for you to know the background. So this is the first time that we do this at Linné University in collaboration with Maria's university. So this edition's result was a bit disappointing because we saw a really positive trend. You can see it on the chart that from 2015 to 2020 we had a big leap of 7%, and that was kind of we also got quite a bit of attention because it was a good result. And then again, we had hoped that this positive trend would sort of continue. It did not. We had a decrease in 1%. I mean, it doesn't really matter. What it shows is it indicates that the positive trend has leveled off. So that's what we can see. And what does it actually mean? As Sarah was referring to the glass ceiling, then is this a temporary plateau? Or is it actually that we've reached some kind of a glass ceiling that is really difficult to crack? Anecdotally, when I talk to media managers, we'll see what the panel says later, the media panel, but they say that it's really difficult to go above 1/3 women in the news content. You can achieve it for some time, and then it very easily falls back if you're not really consistent in your work. And again, I also want to mention, just to get a fuller picture, we have a survey that we complement. It's complementary survey to the GMMP monitoring. Then we send it out to Swedish media houses, organizations, and also to journalist schools, where we try to find out how they work with gender equality. And also, we want to know those who have actually succeeded, because there are quite a few media houses or media outlets that have succeeded to reach close to parity, and how do they do this? So when we launched this year's report in Sweden, we highlighted the stalled development, but we also chose to let the media houses that actually are successful to tell their stories. So it was very nice. But what they tell is consistency, and to those who actually monitor all the time. So it's consistency is the key for success, and also to really use the results. I mean, constantly in editorial discussions, and not lose track.
But maybe you could say something short also about that. For Your Media Institute has actually also been supporting other countries, and have had training in Myanmar in 2020, and so supporting countries who haven't been part, to make more countries present. Could you say something?
Yeah, I could say something. Sarah was mentioning that there was little support this time for national teams. And actually, my institute, we work with international media development, so we have a lot of partners all over the world. And last time in 2020, we supported Russia, Myanmar, Zimbabwe, and Somalia, I think. I can't remember. But this year, we supported Rwanda, for example. So they participated for the first time ever. And we also supported Ethiopia. They didn't manage, though, to... It's difficult. Like with Myanmar, we did quite an intensive training for them in 2020. And now, 5 years later, they managed to do the report by themselves, so to say. So we helped them, we built capacity, and now they have these numbers.
And they did it in exile.
Yeah, they did it in exile. So if you know the history of Myanmar, what has happened since with the coup and everything. So now they did it in exile, and they have numbers to work with for advocacy and to work with media houses.
I think what FOIA has been doing is interesting to think about. If we think that the Nordic countries are a little bit richer, a little bit more gender equal, that you can actually make a difference for someone else, and to involve more people where freedom of expression and gender equality might be at stake much more than in our countries. So I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that you are the only one doing this kind of work, supporting other countries.
I don't know, Sarah would know, but I mean, the way we're doing it, but we've also realized what is effectful, what gives an impact is when you do capacity training with civil society organizations. That's the most effective way of doing it.
Okay, now I believe it's Norway. You unfortunately are gray here, but we have to have different colors, but you're much more colorful.
The oldest one, so that's okay.
So Elizabeth, what do you, how do you comment the trends in Norway based on this?
Well, as has been said also before, it's kind of flattening out, and that in spite of the impression being that the editors and people who actually decide things about the news are more conscious about this than before. That is my deep impression from talking to people. I'm a journalist myself too. Secondly, I think the actual day, well, allow me one small thought here. If it had been this week, where Norway had 5 actors in Jeffrey Epstein's close connection, you can imagine what that day would have looked like. Well, luckily it was not. But the day had other characteristics, like, for example, there was a sports scandal much faced on that day about a trainer who had mistreated his sons, males, not females. And there was another contest around the leadership of the largest Norwegian trade union council. So those events in themselves created a bit of it. The other thing is, on top of politics, we have now a male prime minister, and we have also a very prominent finance minister, and again also foreign minister, and they're all male, except that we've also, I mean, it's forbidden in Norway to have less than sort of average 50-50 in the governments as such. But the most prominent ones in the government circles are like that. When we see the differences, perhaps I'm going too far into the future of this discussion, but I feel that the internet, which looks to us slightly better than the other legacy media, I think I have a hypothesis. I'd like the students to address me on this in a pause perhaps, that the recruitment in journalism schools is very much female-oriented, and these people increasingly find their place in the internet news media. And that could, in the sense that there is a kind of connectivity between the gender of the journalist and the output when it comes to sources, that could be a small explanation here on the positive side. However, on the negative side, the elite orientation, I think, is a main issue, and I think that is global, but it's particularly also functioning in Norway. That we have the given sources, and then we have the sort of selected sources every now and then. But I guess I'd stop there.
Okay. And actually, I realized
actually.
that Finland was higher than, and you didn't say anything, but it's the blue 35 dot there is Finland, who's in 3rd place this year, but been on quite high, you know, throughout years.
Yes, and it was interesting, this Elisabeth's comment on the internet, the websites news, because in Finland it's the other way around. It's these numbers here now are the legacy media. It's press, radio, and TV. So that's 35, but in Finland it's 32 if we take the internet news in account also. So that can, well, it's a small differences, but still. And I think one thing I wanted to point out, that we look at these percentages all the time, but maybe for those who aren't involved here, it could be interesting to know how many subjects we have looked at on that one day. For example, I looked here, it's our internet news included, then it's over 1,000 persons news subjects that Finland has coded. So even though it's only one day, it's quite a lot of people. It's not only these government and parliament people. Like before I went to sleep yesterday, I had to look at how many people in the parliament in Finland are women. It's 46%, and in government it's 58%. And still the numbers look like this, so that's, but we will go into that then. But it's interesting to know that it's not such a small amount of people on one day in main news in a country.
So then we will finish with the success story of Denmark. And you launched your report last week.
Yes. And I have been a coordinator for 3 times now since 2015. And I just have to say something that because Denmark have been a lot in the media due to Trump, and now it's been referred to the Kingdom of Denmark. And it has to emphasize that the Danish report always have been from southern Danish media. It had only been Danish in Danish language media in Denmark, because we have, of course, Greenland, but we also have had within the Kingdom of Denmark, we have the Faroe Island, who have their own language, their own media, etc. They have not been part of the report either yet. Yeah.
Yet they could be next time,
Yeah.
right? The Faroe people here, you can attend next time.
But I would say that something that strikes me is that I think that perhaps this year is the most average year we have had so far. In 2015, the numbers were really influenced by that the day before there was the German Wings plane that crashed in the Alps, and was really a dominating news, and it was all male. Male rescue workers, male airport directors, it was male. And the only women we saw were pictures of women crying, literally, women crying on front pages. The year after, in 2020, was in the COVID period, and we could see that there was, and this gave in Danish media a lot of story about economic consequences and health consequences of COVID, and there's always been this welfare and health have been a place where you can find women's sources. So this kind of why it was higher last time. But this year it's kind of been an average day. There was, of course, and it only influenced the net media. This was the day when Friedrich Merz kind of had to go to a second vote to become German chancellor, but it didn't dominate it that much. So it was an average day with no big stories. The thing I have experienced as a coordinator, every time we had a new report, we have launched it in settings with a lot of journalists and editors, etc. And there have been a shift in the attitude. 10 years ago, Susanne, you may remember, we had a big event on Danish broadcasting, and that was one of the then head editor of the news. He presented himself as saying, okay, I had to go here today to talk with a room full of angry women. Okay, that was his attitudes towards gender. And he said, well, it will come eventually, but we still have to make real news. Kind of, that was something stronger than this, have to care about the percentages. But that surely have changed. And in the first time, there was a lot of people saying, yeah, okay, but we are just reporting, we're just reflecting what's in the world, we can't change it, and it's nothing to do with us. And then the other answer was, oh, it will come just in a few years. Look at how many women who are in politics in the university and all the women who are in journalism school, it will come automatically. We are still waiting for this automatic reply. But now when I launched these reports and discussed it with editors, they have changed attitude, and they themselves have started monitoring and tracking. And when we presented it last week, there were several who came, and we are tracking, and well, we also have this glass ceiling of 30. Sometimes we can go up to 40%, and then we fall back. So now they have come, and perhaps I have never understood why they can't see the economic perspective, that they could have more subscribers if they had a broader interest. So something has changed, but perhaps still on the, now we're monitoring, we are talking about it on a theme day once a month or something like that. So, and we will talk about this later, but the 3 years where we have made a report in Denmark, we have had a female prime minister every year, but it doesn't seem to have an enormous impact. So,
and I think I could say just in general, the fragility of a one-day news. It's been news about Michael Jackson in the beginning, I think, that came all over the world, or like this plane crash in 2015, it affects. But on the other hand, it's always some big news that affects the news day. And what we can see in Sweden, that we, in collaboration with a company called Prognosis, that do the online monitoring of all newspapers, they looked at the same online sites as us for 1 day, 1 month, and 1 year. And in 2020, they were almost identical for the whole year. But 2025, it was actually much higher. That they had the same data as us for the day, but for the month, it went down almost like 7 units, I think down to 31, 33. So it was much lower, similar to what you were saying about the online news. They could be higher, but in Sweden it seems to be lower than that. The conscience work might be more in the legacy media and the public service media. I think we will hear more about that. So before ending this little section, we have the slides and you can look at it. So I will just zap through them, like the development of certain areas of importance. Maybe you think politics and government is an important topic. So does the news media, because that's one of the major topics. And you see the global, and then you see the countries. And you see the positive development, you might say, but not in every country. And similar to in the news of economy, you can also, it's more varied, but it's also still a big topic, and you can see that maybe women are overrepresented in economy. I don't know. But then another topic that is often discussed, that we will discuss further, is if you're an expert in the news. And as you see, that has been a very slow development. And then we have the success numbers in Sweden that we don't know if they're real or if it's just a fault in the coding. But the topic of women expert has been like on the agenda, I think you could say, for many newsrooms. But you see here, you hardly go beyond 30%, right? And knowing the Nordic societies, you have a lot of female experts. It's not a lack of experts. And it's not a lack of spokesperson either. And here you see slightly higher numbers, but it's not beyond 50 anywhere. And another interesting, when you have elections or politicians, who is present in the news in terms of politicians. And you see the global numbers and you see the national numbers here, and they are generally much lower, much fewer women politicians compared to their actual numbers on local, national, and global areas. But you could also say that 2025 has a Trump effect because he's in all news all the time. And you could also say that local news, like national, are more gender equal than international news. That's, I would say, a trend, common trend for us here. But when it comes to reporters, it's more going towards parity, as in real life, like most union of journalists have like 50-50 memberships or even more women. And presenters, at least in some countries, like you use the presenter, female presenter for the male news, kind of, it's like that variation in voices and stuff like that, going as a trend. But you see, on the global level, that's definitely the case, because if you remember, it was only 25% women in the news, but you have 50% as a presenter. So the global trend that compensating with female presenters is something. So that was just a quick go through here, and now you can comment on whatever you like, and I put your names again here for everyone who has forgotten. And you have the presentations of the speakers on our website as well, if you like to know more. So yes?
I can just say something about, I mean, the weakness. There's a lot of strong qualities of the GMMP, but every time we say something about the results, we have to say this is a one-day snapshot, or this indicates. We have to be really careful with the results that we draw. So all the figures are interesting, but how can you use them? How can you use them for change? And just one example would be the one that shows professions. In Sweden, we could see that there were 29% of the politicians that were female, and that's actually a decrease, I think 5% or something. So it's just one day. What does it actually say? What can we draw on it? But we can use it as an indicator. So we used it in the launch of the report in Sweden and pointed at this number. And actually, one of the editors from public service, SVT, that Maria is representing here also, she said, oh, this is interesting. I have to follow up on this to see if this is something that we need to look at. So we can say that it indicates, we can use them. We can't say this is the truth, this is the way it is. It's just one day. But we can push important actors to, and of course we need more research. We need longer timelines.
Oi. What happened?
What the hell?
We had a sound, we don't know.
No bomb.
He was saying that my time is out.
Something happened.
Yes, something happened.
But we continue.
Yes.
Like nothing had happened.
Yeah. But that's why GMMP is so important for advocacy, to highlight things, to make things visually seen, and it's really important.
Yes, and I would like to point out that we have, even though it's only one day, we have never seen that day when men are in a minority here. I mean, if it's 32 or whatever the percentage of female persons is, it's never been the other way around, at least not in Finland. And then I wanted to say that I have this course on gender and journalism every year with my students, and every year we look at what did it look like this week, and we also always get this percentage between 20 and 35, something like that, all years so far, but hopefully this will not be the future.
Finnborg?
Yes, I want to continue what Agneta was saying. Like, if you want to take something from this, I think you should look at the numbers for experts. It was actually shocking to see in Iceland that 13% women, with women being the majority of university graduates for more than 40 years. We have plenty of experts out there, so I think that's something that you could take out there practically.
Hanne and then Elisabeth,
Last year I was contacted by some journalists who wrote an article about something called Folkemødet, which is a great people's union every year in June, which takes place on an island called, not Greenland, Bornholm it's called, where the whole elite of Denmark, politicians, NGO, big company, unions, everybody meet, and they all have tents where they have meetings, etc., about what they find to be the issues at the moment. And the funny thing was that they had done the count and saw that that was a 50-50 representation. And this is because it's the civil society themselves who organize these events. And they know who are the interesting people, who are the experts, who are the people worth listening to. And I think this is a really good indicator that there is something in the news routines that neglect this, because the civil society itself really know who are the important people to listen to. So I think this should be a mind on the mind of journalists, that they have a bias and it's not society itself.
Okay, Elisabeth?
Concerning expertise, the gender gap between women and men when it comes to having higher education is 42 versus 32. Women in favor. I mean, women have more. And then the percentage of female professors have gone steadily up, and it's gone more up than the expertise has gone up. So. But I want to mention something that is not said here, and that has to do with two things: local, global. Where do you find the reporters? We find that when it comes to global reporting, and regional reporting, there is a larger proportion of male reporters than when it comes to local and national reporting. So women have a lower glass ceiling when it comes to getting to do what's considered the most prestigious. Except in some circles it's sports, but that's another question. But then there is another question that has to do with age. And we looked in the Norwegian report both about the age of the news subjects and the age of the reporters presenters. And we find, not surprisingly perhaps, and this is a hypothesis I have to work with, and you all should perhaps, when women are in the two last or the oldest age groups, they considerably slide out of the picture much more than men. And of course that's a concern for me who have belonged to one of these groups, but it also happens to be among the journalists. And I know I've seen people who are screen reporters, TV reporters. Some of them have even said publicly that, well, I don't know when I'm in my 40s whether I can still fulfill my duties here. I mean, you don't hear male TV stars saying that. So there is something here, and I wonder if there's something to combine also the expertise and the ageism, which could be played with in further discussions. Thank you.
Then I have to add with gendered ageism that you could also see that on a global scale, it's the youth who is underrepresented. I mean, we have a huge population in the world with young people, and they are not in the news. But in the Nordic countries, we have a huge older population, and they are not in the news. So it's something going on in the Nordic countries that they don't really, the newsroom don't really grasp these issues about aging population, which is one of the challenges for the world, But I think so. There are many things that you could spur ideas, I think, in the GMMP. But if in the best of world you would have these quantitative and qualitative analysis and do much further, all the students would do special reports on minority groups or on aging, but we haven't seen that yet. But we're positive. I mean, it took 30 years until we had this Nordic event. So we have to kind of persist on the matters and hope that it will be better. So we have 3 minutes left. Should we open for questions, or do you want to say something?
If there are questions, we should have them.
Yes, Martina has a microphone. Anyone wants to comment on this? Or you are too shy? But if you want, you say your name and a short question. You are in shock? There's a question. Now you wait for the microphone, because the Zoom people want to hear what you say. But I can say that you are Malin Bring, a perfect Nordic journalist who knows Danish and been here.
I was just thinking about, when speaking about experts, doesn't it have something to do with the topic of the experts? I mean, what is in the current news? I was talking to a Danish friend today, and he was saying, well, these days everybody's talking about war and Trump, and most experts on these questions are male. I don't think that's the case with Sweden, actually. I think I hear quite a few female as well. But I mean, isn't there a correlation between which experts you're talking to and what is in the news?
Yeah. What are the real news that you were saying?
First of all, the day of the examination was not filled with war stories, so that can't be explained. But we have also, every year, the academic magazine put out this list of the 50 most quoted experts. And there was only 3 women, and the highest ranking was number 40. And there is also the explication, but it's because it's male-dominated areas of expertise. And for instance, a lot of them come from the Danish, what you call Defense Academy. And I went to look at their websites, and 20% of their experts are women. But a lot of them never comes to the in the public. And a lot of, sometimes it's also a habit that it's about war, we ask somebody who knows something about war. But they could also, which they do, that was number 40 on the list, ask somebody who's an expert in peace and peacemaking. So it's also a habit. It's a war, and we ask, and many of these experts comes in full uniform. It's kind of, you get what you ask for. If you keep asking, you could always ask. War implicates a lot of things about civil society, hunger, food, welfare issues, etc. Because we have a lot of things about Ukraine. It's not all about bombs and tanks. It's the main story is what happens in the civil society, and you could find a lot of other experts. So it's a kind of, okay, we have these 3 experts. They work and they look good at television. Let's go with them.
And that will be the final word, because we have a red timeline here. So thank you very much, the panel. I think we will get back to the willingness to be in the media today. Maybe that has changed also. So thank you very much.